Well, it is interesting when people come here. The first thing is, well, you know, when did you buy this? Well, we didn't buy it. What do you mean? We built it. I built it from scratch, and built it to accommodate this environment. And it's designated open space, so it'll never change. So what you see in the hills here will always be like this. Well, I'm Bill Murphy. This is my lovely wife, Brenda. And we founded Clos LaChance Wines actually beginning in 1987. We live in Saratoga, and we put a small vineyard behind our home. Started growing grapes and making wine on a hobby basis.
Actually, growing grapes in the backyard was my idea because I was looking for some landscaping. So I was either going to put an orchard in, or I was going to put a vineyard in. So I decided to do the vineyard in.
Wine, you know, literally and figuratively gets in your blood. And that's what happened. We started making wine in the early 90s. People liked it. We had to come up with a name, and the name is Clos LaChance. Clos means a small fenced-in area. That was that vineyard in Saratoga. LaChance is Brenda's maiden name. Hummingbird is our symbol. If you've seen our label, it has a beautiful hummingbird on it. And did that more on a hobby basis. And as time went on, it became a little bit bigger. People liked the wine. We learned about wine distribution. We came to a point where it was either going to stay a small backyard hobby business, or we were going to make it a real business. And we began to look for land to have a larger vineyard. We began to look to land for our own winery. And as luck would have it, a friend of mine knew the developer of Cordoval, which is the golf resort that is right adjacent to us. And lo and behold, we put a deal together, and we've installed 150 acres of vines on both sides of the golf course and built this beautiful winery.
You know, a lot of people think of it being really hot down here, but we tend to get the mornings will start out really warm, and then at noon we start getting the sea breeze because we're not that far from the ocean. And usually by night or early morning we have fog here, and sometimes it's cooler here than it is in places where you think it would be, you know, cooler.
Wine grapes love that because it really allows the vine and the berries to hang on the vine longer. It gives you the acid and it gives you the flavor that you were looking for. So great wine grapes are grown in temperate climates like this, hot sunny days and cool nights. These are what we call happy vines. You can tell they're very healthy, nice green leaves. Nice. We like this. And the first time we came out here, we stood in this hill. There's nothing here, and kind of looked out and said, "God smiled when He made this place." Well, we built this facility to be the preeminent wine destination this side of Napa, of Sonoma, and tell people in the Silicon Valley area, San Jose, Morgan Hill, Gilroy, you don't have to go to Napa for a great wine experience. You can come here, and you can see it, and you can feel it, you can taste it, and it becomes a gathering place. People come here, they're in a good mood.
I think we also try to have people do a total experience when they come here too, whether they do a tour, or tasting from the barrel, or tasting up in the the tasting room, and we encourage them to bring a picnic, to come and sit on the terrace, and so we try to make it a total experience.
If we go back into the history of the wine industry, the great wineries of the world, the great producing regions of the world have family-owned, multi-generational family-owned wine businesses. And that's our vision, that's where we want to be. That's, in some degree, where we are today. And that's the heart and soul of the wine industry, of multi-generational family wine businesses. There are fewer and fewer left in California. They're being gobbled up by conglomerates, and that's not what we want to do. Because when that happens, you still might have the name, but you're going to lose the soul. You're going to lose the passion. I mean, this is a beautiful place, and it's a beautiful place today. It was a beautiful place yesterday, and our job is to make sure it's as beautiful a place tomorrow. So the whole concept of sustainability and how you farm the place and the kind of facility we built and how we take care of it is just designed to make sure that this place is as good, if not better, 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 100 years from now, as it is today.
Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the Family Pack virtual tasting. Here at Clos LaChance, we wanted to be in touch with all of you out there, be able to provide you with some wine, put together a little video, have a little fun, laugh a little, maybe you can laugh at me a little, and put together a wine package that you could order, have shipped to you, and virtually taste with me, the winemaker Jason Robideaux here at Clos LaChance, and sort of get that tasting experience that you would normally get if you came into our tasting room and did a tasting here. And we chose the family pack because it's a crazy, scary world out there right now, and we all need a little family and a little family time, or maybe some of us need a little less family time at the moment. But family is so important in crazy times like this, so we thought it prudent to put together a pack that's near and dear to our hearts here at Clos LaChance. And big shout out, thank you to the sales and marketing team for putting this together. It's a genius idea. I love being able to, get out there and speak a little bit about the wines that we produce here, give you guys a little insight on the winemaking process, what we were thinking when producing these wines, about the blends and all of that. So sit back, open up a bottle of wine or four, and do some tasting with me. So a little bit about the family and the winery itself, for those of you who are not familiar with Clos LaChance. It's a family-owned and operated winery. It was started back in the early 90s by the Murphy family, who had a 3/4 acre Chardonnay vineyard in their backyard in the Santa Cruz Mountains. They started producing small lots of wine from this vineyard, and quickly found that this hobby was growing into a business pretty quick. At that time, they were installing backyard vineyards throughout the Santa Cruz Mountains for several of their friends and clients, and were starting to produce high quality, ultra premium wines from the region. So as it grew, they moved their operation down here to where we currently are in San Martin, California, about 20 minutes south of San Jose, right on the east side of the Santa Cruz Mountains. It's a Santa Clara Valley appellation. It's a fast-growing, beautiful wine region, producing some world-class wines. And we've been in this location for about 20 years now. Vineyard was planted in 1999 through 2001 over phases, and we have about 135 acres here on our estate. We produce over 18 different varietals from the property, and several different SKUs across many tiers and many different brands. So we got a few fun ones here to taste with you guys, and since I know nobody likes to drink alone, I've got mine poured and ready to go, so we can enjoy some wine together. Let's start with the 2018 Hadley's Cuvee. This one, of course, is special to me as it was named after my daughter, Hadley. It was a sort of an homage to some of the really great white varietals that we have on the estate. We produce a Sauvignon Blanc, we produce a Viognier, we have Marsanne, Semillon on the property. We source Chardonnay from throughout the region in the Santa Cruz Mountains as well. So we had a lot of varietals to play with, and while we produce varietal Viogniers, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blancs, Marsannes, we thought we have these beautiful wines to produce a really great blend. So that's sort of where the idea was born, and we hadn't been producing any white blends at the time. So this was a really fun one for us to work on. It's an interesting wine because there's typically two camps in the white wine world. There's an oaky wine, and then there's a stainless steel wine that has no real oak presence. And what we did with this one is bring those two worlds together. Now, typically people don't use an oaked wine and a stainless steel wine to blend together. they like to stay in either side. But with this one, we brought the two worlds together, we combined them and created this complex, beautiful white wine. The particular blend on the 2018 is 57% Sauvignon Blanc, 32% Viognier, 6% Marsanne, and 5% Semillon. So a little bit about each of those varietals. The Sauvignon Blanc is produced in only stainless steel tanks, as well as the Semillon. And the wine is brought in, hand-picked, hand-sorted into the press. We do whole cluster pressing, and the juice comes off. We then cold settle it for about 48 hours, in which the thicker lees settles to the bottom. We then transfer the clean juice off of the lees and begin fermentation in stainless steel tanks. The wine is fermented at very low temperatures, and why we do this is to preserve some of the natural esters that would normally volatilize or blow off during the fermentation process. While the CO2 and the heat and the alcohol are being produced in the fermentation process, they want to naturally just volatilize and just dissipate out into the air. So very cold temperatures helps preserve this. It creates a very slow fermentation as well, typically between 2 to 3 weeks versus some of the red wines or barrel fermented wines, which would ferment in 3 to 7 days. So the slower process really helps give us that really natural, really bright, really aromatic characteristic to the wine. The Sauvignon Blanc typically brings some really bright citrus, green apple, some melon characteristics to the blend. Now on the other two components, with the Viognier and the Marsanne, we actually do neutral oak aging on those. So we'll do the same process. We'll press the juice off, we'll bring it into tank, we'll chill it down, settle it, and then once we rack the clean juice off of the lees, we'll then start fermentation in neutral oak barrels. So that's where some of the oak characteristics might come through. Now we utilize neutral oak barrels, so it's not going to be an oaky blend and not going to be an oaky component to the wine, but what it does is it rounds out the mouthfeel, it adds a little bit of structure, it oxidizes a little, which breaks down some of the compounds and some of the esters in there and helps bring a more interesting characteristic to it. Your Viogniers and Marsannes typically are going to be a lot more floral. You're going to have orange blossom and violet and perfumey characteristics added to it. So while you still have the bright citrus and the really crisp flavors from the Sauvignon Blanc and the Semillon, you also have these really amazing floral and orange blossom type of characteristics to go with it as well. On the palate, you're going to see that it's actually quite smooth versus more of a strict Sauvignon Blanc style, which might be a little bit more acidic, have a little bit more of a bite to it. This one's going to be a little bit creamier on the palate. You're going to get some really nice stone fruits on the palate, and it's going to be a lot longer. So it's going to linger in your mouth quite a bit longer. So let's give it a try. Yeah, the weight of the wine actually is what separates it from a lot of the other white wines that we produce. While it's not oaky and it's not heavy, it actually sits on your tongue and actually gives you a little bit more oomph, a little bit more bang for your buck, if you will. So now moving on to the next wine in our lineup. It is the 2014 Lila's Cuvee. Now, in line with the family series, Lila is the granddaughter of owners Bill and Brenda Murphy. This was actually one of the very first family series wines that we produced, named after their granddaughter, Lila. It is a Rhone style blend, so we utilize some of our Rhone varietals off of the estate property. We have Syrah, Grenache, Cinsault, Carignan, Mourvedre, and some really fun varietals that we can play around with. As a winemaker, this is probably one of my favorite wines to produce. We get to sit at the blending table, we get to break down each varietal, we get to play around and tinker and a little bit here, a little bit there, and try to really hone in on the best possible wine we can make. Now, our region in Santa Clara Valley and the Central Coast is widely known for its Rhone varietals. It produces some world-class, some really top quality Rhone wines from Paso Robles and Santa Barbara in the south all the way up to where we are up here in the North Coast. So it's a wine that's always really shined, always sold well, always been one of our highest scoring wines and produced really well. This particular blend is 48% Grenache, 40% Syrah, 4% Carignan, 4% Cinsault, and 4% Mourvèdre. So we utilized a little bit of each of the varietals that we have here on the estate to bring different characteristics to the blend. Red wines are produced significantly different than white wines. We bring the grapes in, we hand sort them, then they go through a destemming process where we use a machine to remove the grapes off of the stems, and then the entire skin, seed, pulp, juice from the grape goes into the fermentation tank. Now, the reason the skins, the seeds, everything goes in there is that's where we get our color, that's where we get a lot of our flavors, is actually from the seeds. I liken it to infusing your favorite vodka. If you're looking for a cucumber vodka, you get your vodka, you cut up some cucumbers, you toss it in, you let it soak, you're gonna get that cucumber flavor into your vodka. It's sort of the same idea with the red wines. The more you soak them, the longer you soak them, you're gonna get more and more characteristics out of the skins and out of the seeds, get your tannins, your bitterness, your really great color. So it's a much different process. Now during fermentation, those skins that are in there and macerating and getting broken down, they naturally want to rise to the top. With heat and CO2 being produced, the skins, or the cap, wants to go to the top of the tank. Now, if we allowed this to happen, the top cap would oxidize and would start producing vinegar, essentially. That would be the next byproduct in producing wine. So during fermentation, we actually have to make sure that the cap does not dry out. So we have two methods of doing this. One is called a pump over and one is called a punch down. The pump over is where we actually physically just pump the juice from the bottom of the tank and use an irrigator on top, just like a sprinkler. Sprinkle the entire top cap. That keeps it hydrated, it keeps it wet, and it prevents it from oxidizing. Now with a punch down, it's a more gentle process, typically used for some of our softer varietals, Grenache, Pinot Noir, and that's where you just physically submerge the cap back into the juice using a big giant punch down tool. So it's two different processes, and it gives us two different outcomes, a softer or a more harsh extraction, depending on the varietal and the style of wine that we're actually producing. The Syrah in this blend is going to be sort of your dominant characteristic. So a Syrah is a pretty beefy wine. It tends to have meaty, gamey characteristics, more of your darker black cherry style of fruits, where your Grenache, your Cinsault, your Carignan tend to be a little bit lighter in our region. So you're going to get more of the brighter strawberry, brighter cherry characteristics to it. One great thing about a lot of the Rhone varietals is they blend really well together. Some of the best wines in the world are out of the Rhone region. So utilizing little characteristics from each of them produces an outstanding wine. On the Mourvèdre side of things, that's one of the varietals that's actually very distinct in its characteristics. It has a very spicy, sort of white pepper and allspice, baking spices type of aromatic as well as palate. So that's a fun one to sneak into a lot of these blends, because you'll get the big gamey, meaty characteristics with some really bright fruit, and then you'll have these little hints of allspice and maybe a little pie crust and some really fun things that you're going to get on the back end notes. So let's give this one a try. The great thing about our region as well, and you'll see with this one being a 2014 wine, is the ageability of our wines is great. We have the coastal influence coming over from the coastal side of the range, giving us really cool nights, really heavy fog influence during the summer. So the natural acid that's preserved in our wines is tremendous, and it gives us the structure and it gives it the ageability that we're looking for in a lot of these wines. So while this wine is now 6 years old, it's still holding up great. It's still very bright, it's still very beautiful. The structure is outstanding. It's softened over the years, so it's not going to be quite as heavy on the palate as maybe it was 2, 3, 4 years ago. But the overall structure and holdup of this wine is absolutely amazing. So now we will move on to the next wine in the lineup, which is our 2015 Twin Clone Cabernet. So the family tie with this one is pretty fun. The owner's daughter, Kristen, who is the vice president of Clos LaChance, is married to one of our winemakers here. And in 2014, they had twins. and we were looking for ideas to utilize their name and bring their little boys into the family series of wines. And we looked to one of our blocks in the vineyard called our Whitestone Vineyard, which is our high-end top-tier Cabernet. The block is very unique in the soil structure. We utilize 3 different clones in the block, giving us little nuances throughout the Whitestone wines that we produce. And we wanted to go to the next level. We wanted to create a wine that was just absolutely amazing, very dense, very big, a strong structure. And we did a little experiment in 2 of the blocks, and we did what's called single clustering the vines. So we went through the entire block, and while a normal vine shoot wants to have 2 to 3 clusters on it, we went through and chopped off 2 or 3 to make sure that every single shoot only had 1 cluster. And what that will do, with same idea as with tomatoes or anything in your vegetable garden, is that plant is now going to focus all of its energy into that 1 cluster rather than 2 or 3 clusters. It naturally wants to produce fruit, so it can create seeds and reproduce. So now it's going to put all its energy just into that 1 cluster. And what you're going to get is a lot more complexity, a lot denser of a fruit. You're going to get thicker skins, and it's going to produce a bigger wine. So we just so happened that year we decided to do a single cluster experiment in 2 of the blocks and 2 of the different clones. And the wine that was produced was absolutely phenomenal. Still to this day, probably one of the best Cabernets we have ever produced. And it, instantly came to us. There was no hesitation, as we're using 2 clones that we did this experiment with, twin clone for the twin boys. So it was a really great tie into their little family, and still to this day producing one of the top tier best wines that we produce. The Cabernet process, as far as making the wines, is very similar to what we discussed with the Lila's Cuvee. The grapes are brought in, they're hand sorted, they go through the destemmer and into the tanks. The one thing we do with our Cabernets, especially the top end ones, is we do a much longer cold soak before we start fermentation. So when the grapes actually get into the tank, we'll chill it down to 40-45 degrees and let it soak there. And what it's doing during this time is it's extracting. So like the cucumber vodka, it's pulling out tannins, and it's pulling out color, and it's pulling out aromatics and flavor compounds, and it's really pulling a lot more out. So we'll let that soak anywhere from 5 to 7 days before we actually start fermentation, where with the Rhone varietals, we tend to do 48 to 72 hours or so, and that's all it really needs to extract and pull out really what we're looking for. The Rhone varietals tend to have thinner skins, so it extracts a little bit faster, where the Cabernet skins tend to be very thick and very, very dense. So the longer extraction period really helps create that really big structure and pull out all the tannins that we're looking for, both out of the seeds and out of the skins. The aging process is very similar as well. It's all aged in oak barrels. With this particular blend, we utilize about 90% French oak, of which about 40% is new. We use a little bit of American oak, usually neutral and not new American oak, and that really just adds another depth, another layer of complexity to the final product, and create this really nuanced and beautiful wine while still being one of our biggest structured wines and top end. So let's give that one a try. So some of the things you're really going to pull from this wine are some of the really good Cabernet characteristics. So you're going to have a hint of green in there, but it's sort of on the back burner compared to some of the big molasses, tobacco leaf, really dark blackberry, currant kind of characteristics. The Cabernets, especially off of our estate here, tend to kind of run the gamut from year to year, vintage to vintage. You're going to get a lot of the molasses and a lot of the cocoa and some of the coffee characteristics, and it's actually quite complex, especially because of the certain block, the Whitestone block that we use. It's not very linear. It doesn't have, you're tasting black cherry and then you go right through to tobacco on the back and then you're done. And it offers sort of that longer structure compared to a lot of our other wines. So it sits on your back of your tongue, back of the palate for a lot longer, and you can sort of chew on this wine for a little while. this is definitely one of the wines that I love pairing with food. I bring it home, and when I'm cooking up a big meal or on a big steak on the barbecue, this is just absolutely the perfect wine to pair with that one. So now we'll move on to the final wine, the 2016 JoLi Meritage. So the JoLi was another wine named after Bill and Brenda's grandchildren, AJ and Lila, Arthur, Joseph, and Lila, and they put those together to create this wine, and that's where the JoLi comes from. This wine is a Meritage style blend, so it's sort of a remnants of the Bordeaux region. We have 5 Bordeaux varietals on our estate here: Cabernet, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot, and Merlot. And depending on the year, we try to utilize as many or all of those varietals. But the fun thing about a blend like this, a Meritage style blend, is we're sort of at the mercy of the vintage. So we look to that vintage and see what was the rock star, what was the wine that shined the most from that year. We've had years where the JoLi is a Merlot-based blend, years where it's a Cab-based blend, years where it's even a Petit Verdot-based blend, and that's because in any given year, one varietal might outshine the other. And when we're producing these top-end blends, we want to make sure that we're using the best of the best. We're getting down to even barrel selection level, where we're tasting through individual barrels and making sure just the right barrels actually get into the blend. This blend in 2016 was 45% Cab, 45% Merlot, and 10% Petit Verdot. So again, going back to the twin clone, the Cabernet is going to have a lot of structure to it. It's going to bring some of those more molasses, cocoa, tobacco sort of characteristics to the wine. It's going to be a lot of the structure of the wine as well, where your Merlot is going to bring some of the brighter characteristics. So some bright cherry, even a little bit of ripe strawberry in there. And then your Petit Verdot is going to be your floral and more complex characteristics. So Petit Verdot tends to be a lot more rose petal and violet, which is great for the aromatic structure of the wine. And then Petit Verdot is a very big, dense, tannic wine. So that's usually in smaller percentages because it's going to really overpower the wine if it gets to be too much. So the blend kind of coming together, you're going to get a lot of those deeper aromatic characteristics with the Cabernet, some of the brighter ones from the Merlot, and then a lot of structure is actually going to come from the Petit Verdot, adding to some of the floral and more aromatic structure as well. As far as the production, it's very similar to the last two. With all of our Bordeaux's, it gets the longer cold soak. It gets a little bit longer barrel aging time. So while it's going to be 40 to 50% new French oak, we're gonna try to push this one out to 2+ years as far as the aging process. So it's going to sit in barrel. It's going to get time to actually marry with all of the oak characteristics, oxidize a little bit more to soften some of the tannins to it, and then be able to pull those tannins actually out of the oak barrel and get just a little bit more of the oak tannin structure to complement the big grape tannin structure that we've got for it. So let's give this one a try. Yeah, beautiful, bright characteristics to it. It again is aging extremely well. You'll see as we went through, we did a 14, a 15, and a 16. You can kind of see that the 2016 wines are still a little bit brighter. They still have a little bit more oomph on the palate. They haven't quite softened, where some of the 14, some of the tannins have broken apart and they're actually softening a little bit. So the 2016 is still very bright, very vibrant, right in the window right now of drinking, and going to be a really great complement to any of your meals. One of the things I did want to show everyone, whether you have the bottles in front of you or not, some of the innovation, some of the changes that we've done to some of the packages, and you guys can kind of see it with this lineup. This is the 2014 Lila's Cuvee. You can see the script and the shape of the hummingbird, where some of our new design labels have a little bit bigger of the Clos LaChance logo. The hummingbird's changed a little bit. So we're utilizing some different colors as well. So really fun to see kind of the evolution of the package and where we're evolving, where we're changing things to keep the package fresh, keep it fun, keep it exciting, while still maintaining the sort of elegance and the logo and the symbolism that you've come to know and recognize with Clos LaChance. So I really appreciate everybody joining me today and taking a little peek into the winemaking world of Clos LaChance. Tasting through the wines with me. I hope you guys are enjoying them, and we're going to try and do a few of these through everything that's going on and try to keep up to date with everybody out there. If you want to follow what's going on with us here at the winery, please jump on our social media pages, check out our Facebook, Instagram at Clos LaChance Winery, and you can see when any of these videos will be posted, the awesome sales that we're putting together, the shipping. We're trying to make sure that you guys have your wine and you can stay stocked up through all of this while you're stuck at home. And if you want to see what's going on in the cellar, please check me out on Instagram at CLC_winemaker. I'm posting fun videos and different happenings in the actual winery world, so you guys can see what's going on while we're working through all this and keeping the wine happy and keeping the wine flowing. So thanks again for joining me. Stay safe out there, wash your hands, and hopefully see you guys soon.